A little bit ago, Ben Shapiro was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and they were talking about Christianity and who Jesus was. I found it very troubling about how Ben Shapiro viewed Christ. So let's take a look at this clip.
The Gospels, which were written...
He was just a prophet.
Right? No. We don't even believe he was a prophet.
What do you think he was? What do you guys think he was?
What do I think he was historically? I think he was a Jew who tried to lead a revolt against the Romans and got killed for his trouble. Just like a lot of other Jews at that time who were crucified for trying to lead revolts against the Romans and got killed for their trouble.
There's a lot of issues that come with this theory from Ben Shapiro that Jesus was a rebel who was killed for leading a revolt against the Romans. The first issue with this theory is that it's very different than the teachings and the sayings of Jesus. Let's look at some verses from the Bible. Matthew 22:21 says, "Then he said to them, Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." Paul also says similar things. Take a look at Romans 13:1 and 2. "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." These Bible verses make it very clear that Jesus and early Christians' views on the government was to respect and obey their governing authorities, not rebel against them. This goes clearly against Shapiro's claim that Jesus was a rebel. A second reason that we know Jesus wasn't a rebel leading a revolt is the actions of his followers. If Jesus was a rebel leader who encouraged his followers to rebel against the Romans, you would expect his disciples to die in battle. But they didn't. Jesus' disciples, the ones closest to Christ, didn't try to kill any Romans, but rather willingly went to their deaths without any sort of violent resistance. Finally, the Bible is clear on the reasons for the crucifixion of Jesus. He was crucified because he was hated by the priests. He had allegedly blasphemed against God for making himself equal to God and turned the tables of an unjust society with his teachings and his actions. So we can dismiss the idea that Jesus was some sort of violent rebel leading a revolt against the Romans. Now let's go back to Shapiro's second claim, that the stories in the Gospels are legends from his followers.
So he became legend in story, and it became a bigger and bigger deal as time went on.
Yeah, he had a group of followers, and then that gradually grew, and then...
Do you think he was resurrected?
When we look at the stories of the Bible, a very strong case can be made that the events in the Gospels actually happened. For legend to be created, it typically takes centuries, whereas the Gospels were written decades after the death of Jesus. Mark and Luke were written about 30 to 40 years after the death of Jesus. All the Gospels were written in the lifetime of those who witnessed Jesus, and early Christian creeds, such as the one in 1 Corinthians 15, make it clear that Christian belief did not change at all from its beginning. A second reason that we know the Gospel is not a legend is that the Gospel includes embarrassing material. If the Gospels were a legend, the authors would have avoided embarrassing stories, such as Jesus expressing a desire to avoid the cross, him crying out to God why he had left him, and his family questioning his sanity. A final reason that we know the Gospel is not a legend is the textual reliability of the Gospels. While there are some variants, the message of the Gospel has been retained and shown to be the same as when it was written. There are manuscripts written as early as the 2nd century, such as P52, and a manuscript of the Gospel of John, which dates to the 2nd century. To wrap things up, we know that Jesus was not leading a revolt against the Romans because, number 1, the New Testament contradicts this. Number 2, the disciples died without leading a revolt. Number 3, Jesus was crucified for other reasons. And we know that the Gospels are not legend because, number 1, the Gospels were written too early to be a legend. Number 2, the Gospels contain embarrassing material. And number 3, the Gospels are reliable. So thanks for listening, guys. I'm Zach, this is Adherent Apologetics, and I want you to know that Ben Shapiro is definitely wrong about Jesus. See you next time.